My first experience with the supernatural was one of the most terrible life experiences I can remember. It happened when I was young and dumb, and wanted to go out in the world and explore. While I was out of my home country of Canada, I witnessed a horror I soon hoped to forget. I had gone on a trip with some of my buddies to Montana, just below my home province of Alberta. We were originally going to stay in Yellowstone National Park, but I decided to head to Glacier National Park before camping out in Yellowstone for a few days. We finally reached Glacier Park after 6 hours of driving, and had just enough time to do a little hiking before going to our hotel in a nearby town to rest and move on towards Yellowstone. We had gotten to the park around 4:30 p.m. and decided it was a great idea to hike after dark. So we hiked up the trail looking at the glorious views of rivers and waterfalls of the Avalanche Creek Trail. The light began to fade rather quickly while we were about 2/3 of the way up, and we had hiked into the trail about 10 kilometers, so it would take us about 2 hours to walk back down from that point. This is where shit goes downhill. Myself and my friends were all outdoorsmen and loved to go hiking and travel around the Rocky Mountains, but we were still inexperienced when it came to night hiking. Since the trail we were on wasn't as traveled at this part of the hike, the trail was hard to follow in the dark, although every now and then we would see a sign that notified us that we were going in the right direction. At some point, maybe a third of the way down the mountain, we ended up going off the trail, following a little rabbit trail, thinking we were still on the correct path. We began to figure out that we were definitely not going the right way, as my friend checked the compass, showing we were heading deeper into the Rocky Mountains. Miles and miles of forest. Then begins the mass panic. My friends and I immediately turned around and began walking the way we came, but the trail we were following didn't look the same as it had before, leading us to be even more lost than before. That is when we collectively noticed how quiet it had gotten. No insects, no birds, nothing. It was dead silence. I knew this was a bad sign, as I'm a hunter, and when it gets quiet like this, it means there's a large predator around, and that it's hunting. We had literally become prey to some unknown beast in the woods. We all began getting a sudden spike of anxiety when I let the guys know what was up. That's when we hear it. A noise that brought terror. A guttural howl from up the mountain, and it was then followed by many more. My heart went deep into my throat, and the terror I felt made me shake. Most of my friends did the same, all but two. The others had already dipped, and had begun running in the direction opposite of the howls. We all followed soon after, running ourselves ragged, until we looked behind and saw the eye shine of something that was much larger than we had anticipated. The eyes were at least 6 feet off the ground, and moving towards us, fast. That is when we split up, running in random directions, hoping to lose these beasts. It was never gonna happen. I could hear the breath of one of these things about 20 feet behind me, gaining. All of a sudden, my friend appears from the trees, to my right, and we end up running together until I cut off from him, hoping to escape. I know I left him to die that night, but it was my last-ditch effort that worked out in my advantage. I heard his screams from my left and ran as fast as I could, away from them, with tears rolling down my face, as I hear his screams for help, and him shrieking in pain. Then, nothing, as if he never existed. I continue running down the mountain, until I see a familiar sight ahead of me. It was one of the trail signs showing how far you were on the trail. I stopped, checked where I was, and started running again, hoping to get away from the creatures on the mountain. Another kilometer down the trail, I began hearing howls, getting closer and closer, causing me to run even harder. Looking ahead, I see the sign saying parking lot and run past it in my panic, looking for the keys in my pocket and scrambling towards the only vehicle still left in the parking lot, which was my car. I use my fob to unlock my car from a distance and run as hard as I can towards it, slamming into the side of my door and opening it, hopping in, and starting the car. I look out my window towards the trail entrance and see two pairs of eyes staring at me from just out of the range of the lamppost. They stare at me before disappearing back into the brush as I drive away, never looking back. I arrived at the ranger station by the park entrance and ran inside, looking disheveled and terrified. I began telling the ranger at the desk what had just happened. He then looked at me with a sad face, as if he knew something like this would happen, and called up the search and rescue team to come in the morning to look for them. They were never found.